The Galactic Council chamber was its usual chaos of voices. Representatives from 100 different species argued, debated, and negotiated in their native tongues, while universal translators worked overtime to keep up. At the center of it all sat High Counselor Velmar, his forearms moving in practiced gestures as he tried to maintain order. The Kantari trade routes will remain open to all member species, Velmar declared, his deep voice cutting through the noise. Now we move to the next item, the human proposal for expanded mining rights in the Outer Rim. Ambassador Lisa Monroe stood up from the human delegation table. Her crisp blue uniform bore the United Earth insignia, and her blonde hair was pulled back in the regulation style that humans seem to favor for these diplomatic sessions. Beside her, Commander Jack Sullivan checked his datapad one final time before nodding to her. Honored Council members, Lisa began, her voice clear and confident. Humanity requests consideration for the following proposal regarding mineral extraction in systems Delta 4 through Delta 7. These systems contain resources vital to... She stopped mid-sentence. Jack Sullivan's datapad slipped from his suddenly slack fingers, clattering onto the floor. Every human in the chamber, aides, security personnel, technical staff, had frozen in place, their expressions blank and distant. Ambassador Monroe, Velmar prompted. Please continue with your presentation. Lisa remained silent. Her eyes, once bright with passion for her diplomatic work, now stared at something none of the aliens could see. Zix Nari, the Centaurian representative, leaned forward on his crystalline seat. His species had known humans longer than most, had fought. Beside them in the Orion conflict, had shared technology and culture. He knew their moods, their habits, their tells. And this was wrong. Something has happened, Zix Nari whispered to his aide. Something terrible. The silence spread like a virus. Human merchants in the station's trading halls stopped, mid-negotiation. Human pilots went quiet on communication channels. Even the human children in the delegation creche stopped their constant chatter and games. Within minutes, reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Every human everywhere had simultaneously stopped talking. Velmar attempted to restore order. This appears to be some form of technical malfunction with the human translation systems. If we could have the technical staff examine, it's not. The translators, said Ambassador Kretak, her antennae twitching nervously. The insectoid hivers were particularly sensitive to pheromonal communication, and she was picking up something from the humans that terrified her. They're choosing not to speak. All of them. The chamber erupted in confused chatter. Some representatives demanded explanations. Others called for immediate medical assistance for the humans. A few of the more paranoid species suggested this was the first stage of some kind of attack. Through it all, the humans remained silent. Zix Nari rose from his seat, his crystalline form catching the chamber's lights. Honored colleagues, I remind you of an old saying among my people. When the talkative ones fall silent, prepare for war. This pronouncement sent a chill through the chamber. The humans were known throughout the galaxy for their constant communication. They talked during trade negotiations, during military operations, during scientific conferences. They talked to their allies, their enemies, even to themselves. Human ships broadcast music and messages into the void. Human colonies were beacons of radio chatter. Now, nothing. We must attempt to establish contact, Velmar decided. Zix Nari, your people have the closest relationship with the humans. Can you reach out to their homeworld? I can try, Zix Nari replied, activating his personal communicator. He input the direct code for Earth's diplomatic corps, a line that was always answered day or night. The signal went out. No response came back. He tried the military channels next, then civilian emergency services, then private contacts he'd made over decades of friendship with humans. Silence answered every attempt. I've never seen anything like this, Zix Nari admitted. Even during their darkest wars, humans never stopped communicating. They argue, they negotiate, they plead, they threaten, but they always talk. Ambassador Kretak's wings buzzed with agitation. My people's trading vessels in human space report their escorts have changed course without explanation. They're not responding to hails, but they're not attacking either. They're just leaving. Leaving where? Velmar demanded. Unknown. They broke formation and jumped to FTL without filing flight plans. More reports arrived. Human colonies were recalling their ships. Human stations were going into lockdown. Human military vessels were abandoning their patrol routes and congregating at classified coordinates. And still, not a single human spoke a word. This is impossible, said Ambassador Threll of the Magellan Collective. Humans can't coordinate on this scale without communication. Their entire command structure relies on constant information exchange. Unless, Zixanari said slowly, they had already exchanged all the information they needed before the silence began. The implications of this statement rippled through the chamber. If the humans had pre-planned this silence, if they had known something was coming that required absolute radio silence across their entire civilization, we need to investigate, Velmar declared. I'm authorizing immediate reconnaissance missions to human space. We must know what's happening. But even as he gave the order, Zixanari noticed something else. The human delegation hadn't moved from their positions, but their eyes had shifted. They were now watching the chamber's main view screen, which currently displayed a star map of the galaxy. Following their gaze, Zixanari saw nothing unusual at first. Then he noticed it. A slight distortion at the edge of the map, in the space between galaxies. Space that should be empty. High Counselor, Zixanari said quietly. I think we need to look at the deep space sensors. Velmar gestured to the technical staff. Bring up the intergalactic monitoring array. The star map dissolved, replaced by readings from the Council's most powerful detection systems. These sensors could pick up the faintest energy signatures from millions of light-years away. What they showed made several representatives gasp. There, in the void between galaxies, something was moving. Something vast, something that shouldn't exist. What in the seven hells is that? Ambassador Threll demanded. The readings showed multiple massive objects, each larger than a star system, moving in formation toward their galaxy. The energy signatures were unlike anything in the Council's databases. How long have these been there? Velmar asked the sensor technicians. Unknown, sir, came the nervous reply. They just appeared on our sensors, but based on their current velocity and position, they've been traveling for quite some time. Zixanari turned to look at Lisa Monroe. She was still standing at the presentation podium, silent and still. But there was something in her eyes now. Not fear, not surprise, but a grim determination. They knew, Zixanari whispered. The humans knew these things were coming. The chamber fell into stunned silence as the implications sank in. The humans hadn't just gone quiet on a whim. They had detected these intergalactic visitors before anyone else. They had made some kind of decision, enacted some kind of plan that required every human in the galaxy to stop talking simultaneously. But why? What could possibly require such extreme measures? High Counselor, said one of the sensor technicians, his voice shaking. The objects are accelerating, and sir, they're headed directly for inhabited space. On the view screen, the mysterious objects grew larger, their energy signatures becoming more defined. Whatever they were coming. And humanity, the most talkative species in the galaxy, had chosen this moment to stop talking. The question that hung in the air of the council chamber, unspoken but felt by all, was simple. What did the humans know that they weren't telling? As the council erupted into panicked debate, Zixanari noticed something else. Commander Sullivan had quietly retrieved his dropped datapad. Without speaking, without even looking at it, he was entering commands. All around the chamber, the human delegation was doing the same, fingers moving across devices in perfect synchronization. They were preparing for something, and whatever it was, they had decided that the rest of the galaxy wasn't ready to hear about it. The silence of humanity, Zixanari realized with growing dread, might be the loudest warning the galaxy had ever received. 3 days passed in growing panic. The Galactic Council sent probe after probe toward human space, but each one vanished upon crossing into Earth-controlled territory. No signals came out, no messages, just silence. Dr. Elena Rodriguez sat in her laboratory on Kepler 452b, surrounded by alien colleagues who watched her with a mixture of concern and suspicion. Like every other human in the galaxy, she hadn't spoken a word since that moment in the council chambers. Her Vraxian research partner, Dr. Thesic, had tried everything to get her to talk, pleading, reasoning, even attempting their species' empathic connection. Elena simply continued her work, fingers moving across her terminal, compiling data that she shared with no one. 2 systems away, Captain Brad Johnson guided his cargo freighter through a busy trade route. His crew of mixed species grew increasingly nervous as their human captain maintained his silence. The Deltan engineer, Vrix, finally confronted him on the bridge. "Captain, please," Vrix said, his forearms gesturing frantically. "The crew is frightened. Other ships are reporting that human vessels are changing course, ignoring flight plans. What's happening? Are we in danger?" Brad's hands never paused on the controls. He pulled up a star chart, marked several systems, then deleted the data. His brown eyes met Vrix's compound ones for just a moment before returning to his work. The ship's course suddenly changed, angling away from their scheduled delivery route. "Captain, we have contracts to fulfill," Vrix protested. "Where are we going?" Brad remained silent. He was following a plan that had been transmitted to every human consciousness in a single, synchronized burst of information just before the silence began. Every human knew their role. Every human knew what was coming, and every human knew the terrible price that might have to be paid. In the Galactic Council chambers, emergency sessions ran continuously. Ambassador Kretak was presenting the latest intelligence to increasingly frightened representatives. "Human colonies are being systematically evacuated," she reported, her antennae twitching with each word. "But not all of them. They're abandoning certain systems entirely while fortifying others. Our analysts can find no pattern to explain these choices." "What about their military movements?" demanded Ambassador Threll. "Massive redeployment. Every human warship has left its assigned patrol route. They're gathering in specific systems. Again, we can't determine why these particular locations." High Counselor Velmar studied the tactical display. Red dots marked abandoned human colonies. Blue dots showed systems where human forces were concentrating. The pattern made no sense according to any known military doctrine. "Have we made any progress contacting their leadership?" "None," Kretak admitted. "Earth itself is surrounded by some kind of interference field. Nothing gets in or out, not even our most advanced sensors can penetrate it." Zixnari had been studying his own private data channels, drawing on centuries of Centaurian-human cooperation. "I may have found something," he announced. "Historical records from the human First Contact War." The chamber fell silent. That brief, violent conflict had been the galaxy's introduction to humanity. A week of brutal fighting before the humans abruptly sued for peace and joined the galactic community. "What about it?" Velmar asked. "During that war, human forces went through rapid adaptation phases. They would suffer heavy losses from a new type of weapon, then somehow develop countermeasures within hours. Our military analysts never understood how they managed such fast tactical evolution. Your point? After the war, a human admiral, quietly, unofficially, suggested to his Centaurian counterpart that humans had some kind of shared emergency communication system, something that activated only in existential crises. He called it the Silence Protocol. Murmurs ran through the chamber. Kretak's wings buzzed anxiously. "Are you saying all humans can somehow communicate without communicating?" "Not exactly. More like they can share one massive data burst in a crisis, then operate on predetermined instructions, like insects following pheromone trails laid down by scouts. But that would require incredible coordination," Ambassador Threll protested. "Every human would need to." He was interrupted by alarms. The main view screen lit up with warnings as the sensor network detected massive energy signatures near the galaxy's edge. "The unknown objects," a technician reported, voice shaking. They've arrived at the outer rim. They're doing something to the stars. The screen showed a star system on the galaxy's periphery. 3 of the massive objects had surrounded a small red dwarf star. Energy readings spiked as the objects began to pulse with an unholy light. Then the star went out. Not exploded, not collapsed. Simply erased. By the Ancient Ones, Velmar whispered. They're eating stars. Before anyone could respond, new alarms sounded. Human fleets were moving, not randomly now, but with obvious purpose. They were heading directly for the Star Eaters. Finally, Ambassador Threll exclaimed, the humans are going to talk to us. They'll need to coordinate with our forces to— No, Zixnari interrupted, watching the tactical display. Look at their formation. That's not a diplomatic approach vector. The human fleets were arranging themselves in a pattern none of the alien tacticians recognized. Ships from dozens of systems had converged, creating a formation that spanned light years. What are they doing? Kretek asked. That formation makes no tactical sense. They're too spread out to concentrate fire, but too close together for independent maneuvering. The answer came as the human ships began to activate something. Energy readings, unlike anything in the Galactic Council's databases, emanated from each vessel. The ships themselves seemed to transform, unfolding structures that had been hidden within their hulls. Those aren't standard military vessels, Zixnari realized. They've been modified. All of them. The modifications became clear as the human fleet created what looked like a vast network in space. Each ship a node in an impossibly complex pattern. Energy flowed between the vessels, building towards something the alien observers couldn't comprehend. On a mining station in the Corvin sector, a human supervisor named Sarah Martinez watched her alien work crews evacuate. Her Saurian foreman, Resk, refused to leave without answers. Sarah, please. We have worked together for 5 years. Tell me what's happening. Why are you sending us away? Sarah's green eyes met his reptilian ones. For a moment, it seemed like she might speak. Then she simply handed him a small data crystal and gently pushed him toward the evacuation shuttle. After the last alien worker had departed, Sarah joined the other humans who remained behind. They had work to do. The mining station hadn't been chosen for evacuation by chance. It sat at a critical point in the network humanity was building. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Humans were systematically removing all non-human life from specific locations while concentrating their own forces in these areas. The pattern still made no sense to alien observers, but the humans moved with absolute certainty. In the depths of space, human science vessels activated experiments that had been secretly prepared for years. Dr. Peterson aboard the research ship, Endeavor initiated a sequence that would have horrified his alien colleagues, had any remained aboard to witness it. The humans were creating artificial singularities, not for power generation or space travel, but as weapons. Each one carefully positioned, carefully controlled, part of an even larger pattern. On the bridge of the human flagship Prometheus, Admiral Samantha Chen watched the Star Eaters consume their third sun. Her officers worked in perfect silence around her, each performing their assigned tasks without need for verbal commands. The alien armada that had finally gathered to respond to the threat was hailing desperately, begging for the humans to coordinate their defense. But Samantha knew what her alien allies couldn't understand. Conventional warfare wouldn't work against these entities. The Star Eaters weren't ships or creatures in any sense the galaxy understood. They were something far worse. And humanity had known they were coming. The ancient ruins on Mars had warned them. Artifacts predating any known civilization, discovered during the early days of human expansion. The message had been clear to those who could decipher it. They come from between galaxies. They eat light itself. When they arrive, only silence can save you. Now the human fleet was ready, the network was complete. Across thousands of light years, modified ships and hidden installations hummed with power, preparing for an action that would either save the galaxy or doom humanity to extinction. The Star Eaters turned from their latest victim and began moving deeper into the galaxy, toward inhabited space. toward the core worlds where trillions of lives waited unknowingly for destruction. Admiral Chen gave the order without speaking. Across the galaxy, every piece of the human network activated simultaneously. The silent protocol that had coordinated this massive effort now triggered its final phase. The aliens watched in awe and terror as humanity's true plan was revealed. This wasn't a fleet. It wasn't even a weapon in any conventional sense. The humans had turned a significant portion of the galaxy into a single massive device, and now they were turning it on. The Star Eaters sensed the threat and began to react, but they had already entered too far into the trap. As space itself began to warp and twist around them, the aliens finally understood why the humans had stopped talking. Some words. The Galactic Council watched in stunned disbelief as humanity's trap activated. Space itself seemed to bend and twist across thousands of light years, creating a web of distorted reality that ensnared the Star Eaters. The massive entities, each larger than entire solar systems, found themselves caught in a carefully orchestrated prison of warped space-time. On the human flagship, Prometheus, Admiral Samantha Chen finally broke the silence. Her voice, transmitted on a secure channel to every human ship in the fleet, was calm and steady. Phase 1 complete. Initiate Phase 2. These were the first words any human had spoken in nearly a week, but they were not meant for alien ears. In the engineering bay of a converted cargo hauler, Lieutenant Amy Foster worked alongside her team to activate their ship's hidden modifications. The vessel's hull split open, revealing a massive energy projector that had been built in absolute secrecy. "Ma'am," one of her technicians said quietly, "the aliens are hailing us. All channels. They want to know what we're doing." Amy paused for just a moment. "Let them wonder. We have work to do." The Star Eaters writhed in their spatial prison, their incomprehensible forms straining against the barriers humanity had created. These beings had traveled between galaxies, consuming entire civilizations, leaving nothing but dark void in their wake. They had never encountered resistance like this. On Earth, in a bunker 5 miles beneath the surface, General Marcus Webb stood before a room full of silent officers. Screens covered every wall, showing tactical data from across the galaxy. The general had been among the first to learn the truth when ancient Martian ruins revealed warnings about the Star Eaters. "Activate the planet crackers," he ordered. Throughout human space, installations that looked like ordinary mining facilities revealed their true purpose. Massive gravitational weapons built into the cores of uninhabited moons and asteroids came online. These were not weapons designed to destroy ships or armies. They were designed to shatter worlds. The Galactic Council's emergency session had devolved into chaos. Ambassador Kretak was trying to maintain order while her fellow representatives shouted questions and demands. "Why won't they speak to us?" Ambassador Threll roared. "We are their allies." Zixnari stood calmly at his podium. "They are speaking," he said quietly. "Just not with words. Look at what they're doing. Every action has a purpose." On the main view screen, the tactical display showed the human fleet creating a pattern around the trapped Star Eaters. Ships moved with perfect precision, each taking up specific positions in a 3-dimensional formation that spanned light years. "It's a containment grid," Zixnari realized. "But not just for containment. They're preparing to use the Star Eaters' own energy against them." Deep in the Orion sector, on a space station that had been evacuated of all non-human personnel, Dr. Elena Rodriguez finally activated the experimental device she'd been working on for 3 years. Her alien colleagues had always wondered why she researched such exotic physics. Now they would understand. The device created a controlled cascade reaction in the fabric of space-time itself. It was incredibly dangerous, potentially catastrophic, if mishandled. But Elena and her team had practiced this moment countless times in secret simulations. Miles away from any inhabited world, Professor Daniel Kim led a team of human scientists in activating a network of ancient predecessor artifacts. These relics of a long-dead civilization had been discovered in human space decades ago, but their purpose had remained a mystery to the galactic community. The humans had figured it out. These were weapons of last resort, created by the previous victims of the Star Eaters. The predecessors had failed to stop the destroyers and their civilization had been consumed, but they'd left behind their weapons, hoping the next civilization would succeed where they had failed. As Kim activated the final sequence, the artifacts, across a dozen star systems, blazed to life, adding their ancient power to humanity's trap. Admiral Chen watched as the Star Eaters began to realize they were not just contained, they were being turned into weapons against themselves. The energy they used to devour stars was being reflected, amplified, and redirected back at them. Phase 3, she commanded. On Earth, teams of human mystics, yes, mystics, because humanity had long ago learned that what aliens called impossible psychic phenomena were simply aspects of physics they didn't understand yet, joined their minds in a ritual that would have terrified their rational allies. They reached out across space, touching the incomprehensible consciousness of the Star Eaters. This was the most dangerous part of the plan. To defeat these entities, humanity had to understand them, and understanding them meant risking their own sanity. In the council chambers, High Counselor Velmar was receiving reports from scientific teams trying to analyze what the humans were doing. "This is impossible," the lead scientist reported. "They've created a feedback loop using the Star Eater's own energy consumption process. But the mathematics, we can't even comprehend how they're calculating the necessary adjustments in real time." Zixnari studied the data. "They're not calculating," he said slowly. "They're intuiting. This is why they went silent. They're operating on pure instinct now, all of them connected somehow." The battle had no explosions, no dramatic laser fire, no visible weapons discharging. Instead, space itself became the battlefield. Reality warped and twisted as humanity's trap drew tighter around the Star Eaters. These entities had consumed thousands of galaxies over millions of years. They had never known fear, never encountered anything that could threaten them. Now, for the first time in their eternal existence, they experienced something close to panic. One of the Star Eaters began to collapse in on itself, its form destabilizing, as its own energy-draining abilities were turned against it. The process accelerated, creating a cascade reaction that began affecting the others. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Admiral Chen gripped her command chair as readings went off the scale. "Hold the formation," she ordered. "If even one ship breaks position now, the whole network collapses." Across the galaxy, human crews maintained their positions despite the cosmic forces tearing at their ships. Many vessels were being ripped apart by the stresses, but their crews held firm. They knew what was at stake. In her laboratory, Dr. Rodriguez watched her instruments with grim satisfaction. The theories her alien colleagues had dismissed as impossible were proving correct. The Star Eaters could be destroyed by their own nature, but only if someone was willing to pay the price. The price was becoming clear. Human ships were failing all across the network. Crews were dying by the thousands as their vessels were torn apart by the tremendous forces being channeled through them. But not a single ship broke formation. Ambassador Kretak watched the tactical display in horror. "They're sacrificing themselves," she whispered. "Those ships, they know they won't survive, but they're holding position anyway." "Now you understand," Zixnari said quietly. "This is why they stopped talking. Some conversations are held with actions, not words." The first Star Eater imploded completely, its death creating a shock wave that rippled across space-time. The effect cascaded to the others, each one beginning to consume itself in an unstoppable chain reaction. But the network of human ships was failing faster than anticipated. Gaps were appearing in the formation as vessels were destroyed. The entire plan was in danger of collapse. Then something extraordinary happened. The alien ships that had been watching in confusion began to move. They couldn't understand the physics behind humanity's trap, but they could see the pattern now. They could see where ships were needed. Zixnari's own command ship moved into position to replace a failing human vessel. Other alien captains followed suit, taking their places in humanity's formation without being asked. without understanding the science, but trusting in their silent allies. All ships, Zixnari broadcast to the alien fleet. Form up on the human positions. Match their formation exactly. The human crews that had survived this long watched in surprise as their alien allies filled the gaps in their network. No words were exchanged, but for the first time since the silence began, human officers across the fleet smiled. The trap held. The Star Eaters, these ancient devourers of galaxies, collapsed one by one. Their deaths released energies that should have destroyed everything within 100 light-years, but humanity's network, now reinforced by their allies, contained and redirected even these final death throes. As the last Star Eater imploded, a strange silence fell across the galaxy. Not the purposeful silence of humanity's desperate plan, but the awed quiet of beings who had just witnessed something impossible. Admiral Chen looked at her tactical display. The Star Eaters were gone. The galaxy was safe. But the cost? Casualties, she asked quietly. 40% of our fleet destroyed, her tactical officer reported. Over 300,000 confirmed dead, probably more. Chen closed her eyes for a moment. Then she reached for the communication panel. To all Council species, she broadcast, her voice carrying across the galaxy. This is Admiral Samantha Chen of Earth Fleet Command. The threat has been neutralized. The silence is ended. In the council chambers, representatives erupted in cheers and relief. But Zixnari noticed that the human delegates weren't celebrating. They stood quietly, heads bowed, honoring The aftermath of the battle stretched across the galaxy like a wound. Debris fields marked the locations where hundreds of human ships had held their positions until they were torn apart by unimaginable forces. Recovery teams from dozens of species worked together, searching for survivors among the wreckage. On the medical ship Mercy, Dr. Elena Rodriguez treated injured human crew members who had been pulled from destroyed vessels. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, but her eyes carried the weight of what she had witnessed. Many of her patients would never speak again, not because of the silence protocol, but because of the trauma they had endured. In the Galactic Council chambers, representatives struggled to comprehend the scale of humanity's sacrifice. High Counselor Felmar called for order as debates raged about what had really happened. 300,000 humans died, Ambassador Threll stated. They saved us all, but at what cost? And why didn't they tell us about the threat? Zixnari rose to address the chamber. Would you have believed them? Ancient star-eating entities from between galaxies, weapons that turn reality itself into a trap? Even now, seeing it with our own eyes, we barely understand what they accomplished. Admiral. Samantha Chen entered the chamber, her uniform scorched and torn from the battle. The assembled representatives fell silent as she walked to the center of the room. The humans wished to make a statement, Velmar announced. Chen stood straight, despite her exhaustion. Representatives of the Galactic Council, I am here to explain our actions. She paused, looking around the chamber. Though I doubt you will find comfort in the truth. She activated a holographic display, showing the ancient ruins on Mars. 43 years ago, human archaeologists discovered these structures beneath the Martian surface. They contained warnings left by a civilization that called themselves the predecessors. The hologram shifted to show alien writing and star charts. The predecessors encountered the Star Eaters, what they called the Devourers between, approximately 2 million years ago. They fought them and lost. Their entire civilization was consumed. But they left behind their research, Chen continued. Weapons, theories, and most importantly, instructions on how to detect the Devourer's approach. They hoped the next civilization to evolve in this galaxy would succeed where they failed. Ambassador Kretak's antennae twitched. Why didn't you share this information with the Council? Because the predecessors did, Chen replied. They left warnings on dozens of worlds. Every major species in this galaxy found similar ruins. But you all dismissed them as myths or misinterpreted the data. An uncomfortable silence fell over the chamber. Humans have always been newcomers to the galactic community, Chen said. When we presented our findings about the Devourers 40 years ago, we were laughed out of the council chambers. Your own scientists, she pointed to several representatives, published papers mocking our primitive misunderstanding of predecessor, mathematics. She brought up records of old council sessions. So we stopped talking about it. But we never stopped preparing. Every human ship built in the last 4 decades included hidden modifications. Every colony established was positioned to be part of the network. Every scientific advancement was tested against one question: would this help us fight the Devourers? The hologram now showed the intricate pattern of human settlements across the galaxy. What had seemed like random expansion was revealed as a carefully planned network. The silence protocol, Chen explained, was our last resort. The Devourers could detect and consume any form of energy, including communications. Our xenobiologists theorized that they hunted partially by following the electromagnetic noise of technological civilizations. So you stopped talking to hide from them? Velmar asked. No, we stopped talking to hide our trap from them. The moment they entered our galaxy, every human received a compressed data burst containing the entire battle plan. After that, we operated on predetermined instructions, making ourselves as invisible as possible until the trap was ready. She turned to face the council members directly. We knew many of us would die. We knew our ships would be torn apart by the forces we were manipulating. But the alternative was watching the Devourers consume every star in our galaxy, just as they had consumed countless others. Ambassador Kretak stepped forward. Admiral Chen, on behalf of my people, I apologize for our dismissal of your warnings. How can we ensure this never happens again? Chen smiled sadly. It's already happening again. 3 days ago, our deep space observatories detected gravitational anomalies in the Andromeda galaxy that matched the Devourer's arrival signature. A different breed perhaps, or maybe more of the same. They'll be here in approximately 12,000 years. The chamber erupted in panic. Chen raised her hand for silence. This is why humans never stop preparing. Why we take every seemingly impossible threat seriously. Because we've learned that in this universe, the impossible has a way of showing up at your doorstep. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy struggled to return to normal. Memorials were built on every council world to honor the human dead. The phrase, "when humans stop talking, listen harder," became a common saying among military commanders. But the real changes ran deeper. Human paranoia was no longer mocked. Their constant military preparedness was no longer questioned. When human scientists proposed wild theories about potential threats, other species listened. Dr. Elena Rodriguez returned to her research station on Kepler 452b. Her alien colleagues now treated her work with newfound respect. When she proposed building detection arrays to watch for new types of cosmic threats, her budget was immediately approved. Captain Brad Johnson was promoted to admiral and placed in charge of the new Galactic Early Warning Network. His first action was to integrate human paranoia protocols into the standard operating procedures of all council fleets. The reconstruction of human colonies began, but with changes. The Senate on Earth announced that humanity would share all their hidden technology with their allies. No more secrets, no more solitary preparation. We can't face the next threat alone, President Maria Gutierrez declared. The galaxy must stand together, or fall divided. In the depths of space, AI probes launched by humanity during the crisis continued their mission. They searched for other galaxies where civilizations had fallen to the Devourers, looking for any surviving knowledge or weapons that might help against future threats. One probe, designation Explorer 9, made a discovery that it immediately transmitted back to Earth. In a galaxy 50 million light-years away, it found the remnants of a civilization that had actually defeated a Devourer incursion. The records were fragmented, but they suggested even greater threats existed. Things that made the Devourers look like scavengers picking at the edges of reality. When this information reached Admiral Chen, she didn't hesitate. She immediately called for another council session and shared everything. No more secrets. Humanity had learned that survival in this universe required absolute trust between species. The Council agreed to establish the Galactic Defense Coalition, with humans and Centaurians as the founding members. Every species would contribute to a permanent fleet dedicated to detecting and preparing for cosmic threats. In the months that followed, alien children learned human sign language in their schools, not just as another form of communication, but as a potential survival skill. Sometimes, their teachers explained, silence is the only language that can save you. Scientists from all species worked together to understand the impossible physics humanity had used against the Devourers. What they discovered challenged everything they thought they knew about reality. The universe was far stranger and more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Ambassador Zixnari and Admiral Chen stood together on the observation deck of the new coalition headquarters, looking out at the stars. "Your people paid a terrible price," Zixnari said. "All people paid the price," Chen replied. "Those who died and those who must live with the knowledge of what's out there. Do you think we're ready for what's coming next?" Chen was quiet for a moment. "No, but we'll face it together this time. And maybe that will be enough." In the depths of human space, new ships were already being built. Their designs incorporated lessons learned from the battle with the Devourers. But more importantly, they were being built with input from all coalition species. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about humanity. Their greatest strength wasn't their willingness to sacrifice everything in silence. It was their ability to inspire others to stand with them when the impossible threatened to devour all they held dear. And somewhere in the void between galaxies, other things stirred. Things that had noticed the brief flare of energy when the Devourers died. Things that would eventually turn their attention toward this small galaxy that had dared to fight back. But that was a problem for another day. For now, the galaxy was united, watching the darkness between the stars, ready to face whatever came next, together. 5 years passed after the Great Silence. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Human memorials stood on every inhabited world, not as monuments to the dead, but as reminders to the living. Each memorial bore the same inscription: "They chose silence so we could keep singing." On the restored world of New Haven, a mixed colony of humans and aliens worked together to test the next generation of defense systems. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now director of the Coalition Defense Research Institute, watched as her team of scientists from 15 different species collaborated on projects that would have been impossible before the crisis. Director Rodriguez, her Vraxian assistant, called out, "The prototype is ready for testing." Elena nodded and walked to the observation window. Below, in a testing chamber reinforced with technologies from a dozen civilizations, sat a device that represented everything they had learned from the war against the Devourers. "Beginning test sequence," announced the lead engineer, a Centaurian named Kessitar who had lost his entire family when human forces had to destroy an inhabited moon to create one of their singularity weapons. The device activated, creating a localized fold in spacetime. But unlike the desperate improvised weapons used against the Devourers, this was controlled, refined, safe. It could create the same effects without requiring the sacrifice of ships and crews. "It works," Elena said quietly. "We won't need to die in silence next time." Across the galaxy, similar collaborations were taking place. The Great Silence had taught every species a lesson. Survival required unity, trust, and the willingness to believe in impossible threats. In the council chambers, Ambassador Lisa Monroe, one of the few human diplomats who had survived the crisis, stood before her fellow representatives to deliver the annual remembrance speech. 5 years ago, she began, humanity made a choice. We chose silence over speech, action over words, sacrifice over self-preservation. We did this not because we were brave, but because we were terrified. Terrified of losing our new family, she gestured to the assembled aliens. You see, when humanity first reached the stars, we expected to find enemies. Instead, we found friends. When we warned you about the Devourers and you didn't believe us, we didn't grow bitter. We understood. The threat was too vast, too impossible. So we prepared alone, but we prepared to save everyone. Today, our silence has ended, replaced by something better, a chorus of united voices. Human, Centaurian, Vraxian, Hivers, all speaking, together, watching together, ready to face the impossible together. The assembly rose in applause, a sound that would have been unthinkable during those days of desperate silence. On Earth, in a small classroom, human children learned alongside young aliens from across the galaxy. Their teacher, Marcus Webb Jr., son of the general who had ordered the activation of the planet crackers, was explaining the history of the Great Silence. "Can anyone tell me why the humans stopped talking?" he asked. A Deltan child raised 4 arms. "Because words would have revealed their plan to the enemy." "That's right, Vrix, and what have we learned from this?" A human girl responded. "Sometimes actions speak louder than words, but the best communication uses both." Marcus smiled. "Exactly. The silence saved us once, but it's our voices together that will save us in the future." In deep space, the Coalition fleet patrolled the intergalactic void. Ships from every member species flew in formations that humans had designed but all had helped perfect. Admiral Chen, now Supreme Commander of Coalition forces, stood on the bridge of the Unity, a ship built with technology from every spacefaring race. "Admiral," reported Captain Thorne, one of her human officers, "long-range sensors have detected something unusual in grid 779. "Put it on screen." The display showed a region of space between galaxies. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then the sensors highlighted what they had found, a pattern of gravitational anomalies that matched no known phenomenon. "It's not the Devourers," said Zix Nari, who served as Chen's second in command. "The signature is different, but it's definitely artificial." Chen studied the readings. Once humanity would have kept this discovery secret, investigating alone, preparing alone. But those days were over. "Alert the Council," she ordered. "Full disclosure, and prepare survey teams from all member species. Whatever this is, we face it together." Back on Earth, in a ceremony that had become annual tradition, the names of the 312,847 humans who died in the Great Silence were read aloud. It took 3 days and nights, with readers from every species taking turns. No one was required to stay for the entire reading, but many did. Among them was Sarah Martinez, whose quick action in evacuating her mining station had saved thousands of alien lives. She had lost her husband in the battle, his ship one of those that held position until it was torn apart. As the last name was read, Sarah stood and walked to the memorial. She placed her hand on the stone and spoke the words that had become a prayer for many. "Your silence was heard across the stars. Your sacrifice echoes in eternity. We who remain speak for you now." In the years that followed, the galaxy continued to change. The Coalition grew stronger, its members more united than ever before. When new threats emerged, and they did, as the universe seemed determined to test all life, they were met with coordinated responses from all species. Humanity's role evolved as well. They remained the watchers, the ones who took every threat seriously. But now they shared this burden. Other species learned human paranoia, human preparation, human willingness to consider the impossible. And when the next great crisis came, the discovery of the entropy shepherds, beings that sought to accelerate the heat death of the universe, it was a Hivers scientist who first detected them, a Centaurian strategist who designed the defense, and a mixed-species fleet that engaged them. The battle was won through communication, not silence. Through unity, not solitary sacrifice. 50 years. After the Great Silence, as she lay dying of old age, Admiral Samantha Chen received visitors from across the galaxy. Each came to pay respects to the human who had commanded the silent fleet. To the young officers who asked about those desperate days, she always gave the same answer. "We stopped talking because we thought we had to face the darkness alone. We know better now. The universe is vast and full of terrors, but it's also full of friends. Never forget that. Never be afraid to speak, and never be afraid to listen." When Chen died, Her funeral was broadcast across the galaxy. Billions watched as representatives from every species spoke of her legacy. But the most powerful tribute came in the moments of silence between speakers, a reminder of the time when humanity's silence had spoken louder than any words. The memorial service ended with a transmission from deep space. Explorer 9, the probe that had discovered evidence of even greater threats, sent back one final message before its power cells finally died. Still watching, still searching, still protecting. It was, perhaps, the most human message of all. The council chambers, a new motto was inscribed above the great doors. From silence, unity. From unity, strength. From strength, hope. Below it, in smaller letters, were words that every child in the galaxy learned. Remember the humans who died quiet, so we could live loud. And in the depths of space, the watchers kept watching. But now they watched together, spoke together, and faced the impossible together. The great silence had ended. The great conversation had begun. And somewhere in the vast dark between galaxies, things that had taken notice of this small, brave galaxy full of species that refused to die quietly began to reconsider their approach. Perhaps these beings were worth investigating more carefully. Perhaps they were worth talking to. But that would be a story for another day. For now, the galaxy lived, laughed, and yes, talked. And if the day ever came when silence was needed again, well, they had learned that lesson too, together.